Hey everybody, Gormos here with some more Tank Simulator battle gameplay from the closed beta. Now, I did not have that much time to play last week, so this Tuesday was the first time I really got to play War Thunder again, and in this week there have been quite a few interesting changes and additions to the beta test. So I think I go over the changes a bit, and also I would like to mention a few things that I saw in the closed beta question and answers read, because I think there are a few interesting informations there that not everybody is aware of. Now, there was a wipe again, and I want to try the new Jagpanzer IV L70, so most of the footage is from the German tanks again, as I played up the tree again. There will be more footage from the Russian tree later. Also, during the Tuesday test, all maps were in the rotation for simulator battle mode, not just Kursk. So a lot of this footage is on the smaller arcade maps, because I did not get Kursk that much. Which is a pity. I think most of the arcade maps do not suit simulator battle gameplay very well. Cuban comes closest to being suitable for simulator battle and realistic battles, I would say, but in general those maps are a little bit too small, with little or no opportunity for long-range engagements or flanking moves. But playing simulator battles on jungle is an interesting experience. Not a particularly realistic one, rolling around with a tiger on a Pacific island, but quite interesting. Because of the dense vegetation and the large trees blocking the light, it is often very hard to spot enemies, even if they sit right in front of you, which leads to a lot of very tense moments, and I think you will see that in some of the footage from the jungle map I have. Having a forest with dense vegetation is an element I would like to see in a few future realistic maps as well. Not the whole map, but as an element or a part of the map. I think that would be nice. Anyway, what is new in the closed beta test? Well, let's start with the new vehicles that got added into the game. We got two new self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, one for each nation, and a new tank destroyer for the Germans. The new anti-aircraft guns are a 37mm flak on a Sonderkraftfahrzeug 6 half-track for the Germans, and the 25mm cannon on a gas track for the Russians. Now, I personally don't use AA vehicles that much, especially since in simulator battles there are not that many player-controlled planes around. But still, the addition of those two vehicles is very interesting to me, since it shows that War Thunder Ground Forces already has the option to introduce half-tracks and wheeled vehicles, and that opens up a whole lot of options for new vehicles that we might see in the game. For example, the M3 gun motor carriage half-track tank destroyer, or the M6 GMC truck tank destroyer for the US tree, which both played an important role, for example, in the North African campaign. So that's why I am excited to see those two new vehicles, even though I don't really need them for the AA role in simulator battles as of yet. Playing simulator battles, I have so far seen only two player-controlled planes actually destroy a player tank. One was flying a Jak-9D and the other was in a Henschel HS-129. The reason for the small amount of planes in simulator battle mode in the closed beta is, in my opinion, of course, that it is harder to fly in simulator battles and also way harder to spot targets from the cockpit. But that also made me think some more about the effect that the introduction of ground forces might have in simulator battle mode in the aircraft mode of the game. Currently, it often takes a while to find a game in simulator battles on the live server. In the closed beta test, I would say it surprisingly does not take that long. In the EU time zone tests, when we have about 6,000 to 7,000 players overall, it's pretty quick to find a game in simulator battle mode. If you play Russians in rank 3 at the moment, you get one pretty much immediately, and the player numbers are not bad either. I think when the ground forces go live, it might be a lot easier to find games for the pilots too, as the tanks and the planes are combined, and it's going to make flying a ground attacker like an IL-2 a whole lot more interesting. I hope that Ground Forces Simulator Battle Mode will convince more people to give simulator battles a try with the airplanes as well. It got me into trying simulator battles after all, and about that, by the way, I will set up a new PC for recording simulator battles, because my current one can't handle recording at a higher resolution than 720p, which I think might be insufficient when flying simulator battles. I hope I got some footage from that soon. Anyway, back to the closed beta test. Another new vehicle we got is a tank destroyer for the Germans, the Jagdpanzer IV L70, and I was really looking forward to trying that one. This Jagdpanzer IV version has the L70 cannon that the Panzer uses, and it has 80mm of frontal armor compared to the 60mm of the earlier Jagdpanzer IV L48. I really like this vehicle, and I would go as far as to say that the L70 Jagdpanzer, like the Panther, is stronger than the Tiger or the IS-1 in a tank versus tank fight. Mostly because of the great gun, which can deal with pretty much anything it could meet at the moment. And the armor is pretty good too. Its 80mm has a 45-degree slope. That's less slope than the Panther got, so it won't be as strong as the Panther's hull armor, but the slope is enough to make the armor usually more effective than the Tiger's hull armor or the Panther's turret armor. And it of course has a very low silhouette and it is hard to spot. So if you can find a spot where you can set up in a very slight reverse slope with your tank slightly angled back to increase the angle of your armor, you are very hard to penetrate or even to see. It lacks a turret of course, but driving the L70 as well as its predecessor the L48 a bit, I have to say I don't miss the turret that much, a lot less than I expected I would. I think my expectations of how much I would miss a turret were influenced by World of Tanks a bit. The thing is of course that in World of Tanks you got aiming time, you have to wait until the aiming circle gets small enough, and if you don't wait you have a good chance that your shot comes out of the barrel sideways and misses. And traversing your vehicle resets the aiming circle, so having to turn your vehicle while aiming at longer ranges is a problem. In War Thunder of course the shell flies where your gun is pointing. It's up to you to aim it correctly, so turning a bit while you reach the end of your gun traverse is not a big problem. It's a problem when you're immobilized of course, but other than that I felt that the traverse speed of the vehicle is good enough that not having a turret is not such a big deal. So in my opinion the Jagdpanzer IV L70 is about on par with the Panther and a very powerful vehicle, especially at long ranges, as most German tanks. Now, a few other tanks I talked about in the last video have changed their place in the tech tree, so let me give you a small update on that. For example, the T-34-57 and the T-34 model 1942 have switched places in the tree. The T-34-1942, which is armed with a standard 76mm F-34 cannon, was on rank 3 and moved down to rank 2, and the T-34-57 moved up to rank 3 from rank 2. A good decision in my opinion. The model 1942 with its 76mm cannon had problems at rank 3 and was not much different from the model 1941, with the exception of slightly better turret armor. The T-34-57 is simply the stronger tank of the two, thanks to its better high-velocity cannon. The 57mm cannon of this tank is good enough to have a decent chance to penetrate most of the rank 3 tanks, at least on the side, even though the damage of the relatively small caliber weapon is not that high. That's the changes for the medium tank line. There were changes in the heavy and tank destroyer line as well. The KV-2 and the KV-1 SIS-5 also switched places. The KV-2 moved up to rank 3 and the KV-1 down to rank 2. Now about the KV-2 moving up, I think that is one example for where having the same tech trees for different game modes will most likely present a problem. I understand that the KV-2 was too strong for rank 2 in arcade and on the small arcade maps, but as I have already said last time, with its low muzzle velocity gun and a very slow reload, it's a very hard tank to use in simulator battles on a map like Kursk, which puts way more emphasis on long-range fights, and the KV-2's armor won't protect it much against most guns on rank 3. I think in simulator battles in the future, when we get more realistic maps, the KV-2 will be one of those tanks that need a lot of skill and a gunner that really knows how to get the range correct. And while we talk about range finding, the gun sight was also updated. There is now a new range finding scale using mil-dots. If it works correctly, it should enable you to get the range pretty accurately, assuming you know how to use the rangefinding reticle and the measurement of the target you aim at. So that's pretty cool. I will most likely get into using the rangefinder in more detail in a future video. I need more proper long-range fighting footage on Kursk for that though. Now, the KV-1 CIS-5 moving down to rank 2 is okay in my opinion. As with the T-34 model 1942, I think the gun is simply insufficient at rank 3, and even though the KV-1 CIS-5 has some extra armor at the front by the looks of it, the guns on rank 3 don't have much trouble with it, which leaves the KV-1, if on rank 3, a slow and easy target with a bad gun. Now, the last tank that switched places in the death tree is the Su85 M, which came down from rank 4, which we don't have access to at the moment, to rank 3. The Su85 M is basically a Su100 chassis but with a 85mm cannon, so the frontal armor is better than on the Su85, otherwise it's pretty similar to the standard Su85, and I think it's a good decision to move it down. I would consider the Su85 M a weaker vehicle than the Jagpanzer IV L70, which is also on rank 3, and I have used the Su85 M back when we got to test rank 4 tanks, and I think it will have a hard time competing at that high rank. At high rank 3 where it is now, I think it can do quite well. So, that's most of what's new in the closed beta test for now. Now, I would like to take a short look at a few things that were mentioned in the question and answer thread on the forums, because I think there are a few interesting things that answer some questions that come up often. For example, since we just talked about the gun sights, it was asked if and when historic gun sights will make their way into the game. That was asked multiple times, and the answer is that they do of course plan on adding the historic gun sights, but this is a big task. Because all of those sights have to work properly of course, and all the nations had their own version that worked a little different, and you have different ammo types with different muzzle velocities and so on. All of this has to be taken into account, and this takes time. So they will start with the most common gun sights, and extend from there later on, when more pressing things have been implemented first. According to the forum, the German gun sight will be the first one to be introduced. And that also answers another question that often comes up: if you will be able to zero your gun sight. Apparently you will be able to do that, because that's how the German gun sights worked. You don't use a scale to aim above the target to counter bullet drop, but instead set the range directly on your gun sight to zero for the proper range. There is also some interesting information about future maps there. A lot of people asked if there will be city maps or villages on the maps in the future, and according to the devs, those are already being worked on and being internally tested. So, no worries, we will see city maps as well. I would say about simulator battle and realistic battle mode that I assume they will be as close as possible to how the real terrain looked like. So if there was a city or a village in reality, it will be there in the map as well. We can already see that on the maps for the aircraft part of the game. If you compare them with satellite pictures of the real thing, you will notice that they are pretty accurate most of the time, and I hope that will be the case for the tank maps as well. Now, another interesting thing about the maps that was mentioned is the fact that on the Kursk map not all the terrain is being used at the moment. The map is actually even bigger, but for the first test not the whole map was used. So the simulator battle maps are potentially even bigger in the future than we have seen so far. I can't wait to see what they come up with. With the large map sizes and villages and cities, there is a lot of potential for great maps in the future. Now, one more thing I want to mention really quick in this video, a short update on the respawn in simulator battles. Now, the opinions on that are divided. I personally am not such a big fan of respawns in simulator battles, but others consider it a good way to balance weaker tanks or make the battle feel bigger. I can accept that. If most of the players feel that respawn is a good way to balance weaker tanks, I won't object. However, if the respawn stays, it has to be done properly. I have mentioned that in an earlier video. If this is not handled carefully, it can create more balancing problems than it solves. And I think we currently have an example for that in the closed beta test. At the moment, it's pretty simple. Medium tanks and light tank destroyers get a respawn, heavy tanks and heavier tank destroyers do not. Now, that sounds reasonable at the first look, but it has one big problem. Being a heavy tank does not necessarily mean that the tank is superior, and being a medium tank does not mean that the tank has to be weak. Also, the definition of what a medium tank or a heavy tank is was not the same in every nation and changed quickly over a few year time period. And that's where we have a big problem at the moment at high rank 3 matches. As I have said in the last video, I personally consider the Panther the best vehicle we currently got in the game, and the new Jagdpanzer IV L70 is not far behind it. In my opinion, they are both better than the Tiger in tank vs tank fighting. But unlike the Tiger, they both get respawn. Now, if we look at the Russian tech tree, the most powerful tanks there are in my opinion the IS-1 and the Su152, which both don't get a respawn. The D-34-85 is a fun tank, but with its very weak armor it needs to be driven with skill to be effective against German high-tier tanks. The Panther is not surprisingly at the moment the most played German high tier, and as far as power is concerned, its counterpart is the IS-1. So on high rank 3 we have German teams with lots of Panthers and Jagdpanzer IV L70 as well as a few Tigers, versus Russian teams with IS-1s, Su-152s and a few T-34-85s. So the Germans just get more respawns, which means they get more tanks. So on average about 50% to 70% more, and those tanks, the Panzer and the Jagdpanzer IV L70, are very powerful. The result is that the balancing at rank 3 is pretty off, and that leads to not many people playing Russian tanks at this high tier. So that's just an example for balancing with respawns gone horribly wrong. If you do respawns, a lot more effort needs to go into deciding which tanks need the respawn and which ones do not. But of course, it is still beta and I assume this will change soon. Well, that's it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching and maybe I'll see you next time.